Well, thank you everybody for coming to our 24th annual senior reading. And this year we have 7 extraordinary students graduating, as you will soon see. So they will be reading work of their choice. It may be in the chapbook. They'll probably tell you if it is, or it may not be. But you'll be hearing some of their best work in the short reading. So I should have introduced myself. I forgot about that.
You need no introduction.
I'm Sandra Meek. I'm the coordinator of creative writing and teach creative writing poetry here. And it is my honor to start the introductions. So we will follow in the order of the chapbook. So our first reader will be M. Cross. Introduce you. A creative writing major. M has always harbored interest in storytelling and also in science. Her anthropology minor inspired her to become a science writer, which she plans to pursue in grad school. At Barry, she's tried new creative things, Dungeons and Dragons games, long-term anthropology studies, and essays on the development of folklore that have pushed her out of her comfort zone. She's sad to leave this place, but happy to have the world in front of her. Please welcome M. Cross.
I don't think I'm supposed to start with this, but I just want to say how much of an ego trip it is to have your favorite professor introduce you.
Thank you.
I am going to be reading from the chapbook, so all of these are in there. If it's okay with you, I'm going to read. How many of them should I read? Honestly, I don't know.
From the chapbook?
Yeah. Like, how many do we have time for? I don't want to overstep.
Aim for 8 minutes. I think that you can read those. I'll go like this.
Gotcha.
Time's short.
All right. Bibliophilia. Time accrued pages, cercerate in the hand. Small black letters cantering seamless, iambic hexameter strides. Before building to a vault, snapped, off between stanzas. A turning of a leaf gives up a hidden flower, pressed dry in the pages and brown. And when you raise it from the words, it comes unwillingly and leaves a bitter-stamped echo behind. Perpetual motion. Gaping beyond gape, unhinged, white, not white, and skinless. Oh, I'm sorry. I should preface this with saying that this piece is about a Carcharocles megalodon jaw that someone is standing inside. Gaping beyond gape, unhinged, white, not white, and skinless, distortion in the grip of pain. He, she, it was alive once. Grandmother of grandmothers of fish, with broken glass for skin. White-rolled marble eyes bright in the liquid dark, chasing breath and tomorrow in cold water meat. I wish they would be kinder, let her, him, it, loosen the unnatural wrench of displayed trophy hunting an age of ages ago, and stop stealing its, his, her, palm-huge teeth, serrated and unbroken, with ugly pliers for tourists. That awful dead stretch of not quite circle screams, the hooking wires down, and the boys jeer, spinning, making jaws with tiny hands fleshed out, and snapping them squealing in the shadow circle of a past, returning. Summers I don't remember. Wind fresh white snaps on the line. The crisp linen scent of my grandmother's beige is a natural choice. My child feet stomp around in cowboy boots, circles traced around her vanillin light clothes, her hands poised dancer light at the clothesline overhead. Jersey cows give Jersey cream 2 hills away. This is Bucks County, and here the lacewing sings. And I am now realizing that there are 2 versions of the Carcharocles megalodon poem, and I don't know why. I think that's my fault. So I'm just going straight to hyphae. Hyphae, by the way, is the fun word for the things that make up fungi. They rose in the dark, pushing, from egg to flesh, unfolding. From the womb of loam and quiet stirrings, they followed the streaming lines of summer rains into a growing place, burst in slowed silence into seeing. They rose in a ring, swelling, upward and outward, ripening, to full-spread parasols with gills white in the morning's first glance. They reached for each other, extending, shiver-thin roots in unheard touch. They waxed tall, flowering, with a pleasant musk belonging to each other. Brown flecked their caps, circles within circle, and pale half-skirts sweetly hanging looped around their stalks. They sank and grew, spreading, embraced into a mesh, reaching beyond, twisting down into unturned dark under dark. They were unseen again, back into ever-presence, twining through all earth.
Wow, Meg shark tooth mouth thing, that was awesome. I love that. It was so cool. Hey, I also want to just say again how awesome it is that you all are here. By the way, I am Clinton Crockett Peters. I am a dad. I am a nonfiction guy. I am a lover of verbs, an antagonist to sloths, a recent druid convert, an instigator of rejection parties, and a very proud professor. I want to say to all of the family members, all of the parents, and all of the friends, thank you for being here. Writing, as some of us know, can be a very lonely, isolated art form, and it's really good to have company, so sincerely thank you. I have the delight to introduce my favorite face painter, Quinn Dankesreiter. I have known Quinn since Intro to Creative Writing in spring of 2020, which was really cool. And she was my favorite. I was so happy Quinn came back. There was a moment when I thought Quinn was not going to do creative writing and was out of my sights. And then when they came back, I was like, yeah. So thank you, Quinn, for coming back. Quinn is a writer originally from Deary, Pennsylvania. That is a town for writers to come from, 100%. They possess an interest in history, archaeology, linguistics, and foreign language, which is often reflected in their work. Quinn prefers to write nonfiction, but even their short stories and poetry, which are awesome, are mostly factual with a fictitious sheen. Their Achilles heel when it comes to writing is assuming that everyone already knows the fun fact they want to write about. Hashtag check. Quinn is hoping to flee the country. Some people hope. Quinn is doing it. As a Fulbright scholar to Germany. Special. Quinn is hoping and is succeeding to flee the country shortly after graduation, possibly never to return. Let's welcome Quinn.
Hello. Let me just open up my laptop. I have a backup and a backup because my luck is terrible. Everyone knows this. Speaking of terrible luck, I'm going to be reading something that has part of an excerpt in the chapbook. I think it'll be 8 minutes. Apologies if it's a bit over. It is the prologue to my book that I've been working on for about a year now, focusing on my family incident and kind of everything that goes along with that. Essentially, in the spring of 2020, when I first took Intro to Creative Writing, my father was arrested for attempting to murder my mother. And so I have been writing a book about that and kind of everything that led up to it. So this is my prologue, The Origin of Language. My father's last name was taught to me in 3-letter increments, sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table. I don't remember my age, but I remember the name being almost unfamiliar. It wasn't mine yet, but they said it would be once I learned how to spell it. My father, my pap, and my grandmother were all sitting in chairs that matched the table. My seat was a wobbly gray computer chair from the other room that I had abandoned. I stood beside my pap to practice. Standing, I believed, would help me think. We had been practicing over and over again, spelling our last name, making me more familiar with each attempt at it. They tried to make it easier for me and assumed that if I recited it in clumps of 3 to a beat, it would be easier to process. The practice commenced as I was surrounded by the other Dankesreiters, reciting each letter from memory to the beat of my pap's hand on the table. I fixate on it and let the letters roll off my tongue. D-A-N-K-E-S-R-E-I-T-E-R. I looked up from his hand and saw them smiling. They were proud of me. I was told the day I spelled it perfectly that our name meant thank the writer, and everyone at the kitchen table nodded. To them, this was fact. My father was there, smoking cigarettes with my grandmother, who claimed she hadn't had one since retiring. I suppose she didn't count it if it was only on Wednesdays. If I close my eyes, I still see myself there at my grandmother's kitchen table. Though the size of my limbs changed as I grew, I would always sit on the wobbly computer chair. I was always told that children should be seen and not heard, so I didn't talk much during these kitchen table conversations. Instead, I sat quietly with the aftertaste of my father's Mountain Dew coating my palate and the burn of secondhand smoke in my throat. My pap would crack a joke, and a laugh would form on my lips at a punchline that I was not old enough to understand. But I laughed anyway, because I was happy, I was there with my family, and I thought that they loved me. The last name of someone often hints at their ancestor's occupation. Our more recent relatives that I was told about by my father were not writers, but drunks from Pittsburgh, a place I had visited but did not know. Growing up, Pittsburgh was the closest city to me, and so often we went there on field trips. When entering into the city by big yellow school bus through the Fort Pitt tunnels, my classmates and I would count 1, 2, 3 before our cheeks expanded and we all held our breath. The name of the game was to make it through the tunnel without taking a breath. As the bus fed through the lights on the inside of the tunnel, and the inside of the tunnel streamed by like stars, I felt lightheaded for a moment. When we would emerge, I would gasp for breath, the rush making me feel giddy and alive for only a moment. The air I breathed then was filled with prepubescent sweat and laughter on the way to the Carnegie Science Center. The sky would be blue and the sun bright. I had never known it any other way. Decades earlier, the sky above Pittsburgh was perpetually gray. The air was heavy and black and provided Pittsburghers a lungful of steel smog. This was the Pittsburgh that the Dankesreiters before me were familiar with. When driving through the city during their time, skyscrapers would emerge like hulking giants from the Melanotype stratosphere. These Dankesreiters were likely steel mill workers or another form of blue collar. I can't be too sure. I don't know much about them other than the city they hailed from and their pick of poison. I imagine they drank to ignore the stiffness in their muscles from long hours in factories. Each movement caused beads of sweat to pool on their brow before being tinted with gray, floating smog particles. Every day they worked, they left rewarded with a capitalist crown. For them, the stiffness signified an early death was already taking hold, and every day that their bones hurt worse, their body prepared them ever more for rigor mortis. I imagine my ancestors stiff because my father was. He could never walk right, likely because his toes never curled towards the floor, but up to the ceiling. They always looked like they were straining, like they were trying to abandon ship. As a result, he walked with more of a cryptid-like gait than a straight trajectory, and I assumed he had to get it from somewhere. As a child, I always thought my name was fitting because I was going to be a writer. I sat my parents down and prepared a big speech about what my first book was going to be with my parents. I felt a connection to my name because I realized that like the Dankesreiters before me, I was meant to carry messages. It is fate for me to be a storyteller and a weaver of words because this destiny is in my blood, ingrained in my name and bones. It was when I took German in the 8th grade that I realized my name was a lie. I chose German over Spanish or French because of my family ties, and I was eager to learn all that I could. Early on in my education, I was given a large vocabulary sheet with about 40 common verbs. One such verb was the verb reiten, meaning to ride horses. The verb for to write was schreiben, a word that was nowhere in my last name. When I asked the teacher about it, she said it was common for German and English to have false cognates, or words that seem like they mean something, mean the same thing, but are two entirely different meanings. I was perplexed and surprised that my family had been wrong all these years. We shouldn't have been wrong, but the truth was there on the page. There was the verb, and at the top in my familiar scrawl was my first and last name.
A disconnect had formed because of a lie that I had been told for years. I told my father that night at dinner about what I had learned in class, and he didn't believe me. Though our interpretation of my ancestor's name was wrong, I often wonder if they would be proud of me. If they could hear what I have to say, would they believe me? Were they there with me beaming as I got my last name correct at the kitchen table? Maybe they would love me like my mother. I would hope that my ancestors would do better than to love me like my father. My father was a messenger. He carried lies. The lies he told my mother and I became my inheritance. I received little else from him but the remnants of his falsehoods and the bittersweet memories he left me with. The lump in my throat when I think of the few good moments I had with him are tainted now with an aftertaste worse than Mountain Dew and secondhand smoke. It tastes like muffled screaming in the next room, of stomping feet bursting through a door and a hand coming to grab you. It tastes of a dirty palm pressing against your mouth, forcing you to taste your own tears while you stifle a sob. It tastes like childhood. I like to think of myself as an honest woman, but I can honestly say that sometimes I do not feel like a woman at all. But woman is my inheritance from my mother. Her side was too poor for me to get much else. From my father, I got pain, and from my mother, I received the ability to accept it. We are a lineage of women who have accepted pain time and time again, who see how much we can take before we break. The acceptance for us is not only inheritance, but a curse. The best way to describe the nicely women is to say that we are women with blood in the milk. We are beautiful with pale skin and flushed cheeks and the strength to hold bales of hay and accept malice from those we are expected to love. I used to be a clone of my mother. I had her hair, her eyes, and her smile, but I was not untouched by my father. In more ways than one, bits of him have slipped into me unwillingly. I have my father's anger, and his fury bloomed in me. As I grew, my mother's eyes curdled in me and changed from blue to green. I remember his eyes. I don't believe they ever lit up with laughter. They were always dim, and the reflection of sunlight made it feel like you were staring into the eyes of a corpse more so than a man. When his wrath boiled over, his eyes shifted ever so slightly. The color of his eyes was not really a color at all, but a cold fury that froze one's core before the blows fell. It would settle in my gut, this feeling of panic, of fear, that would grip me as the air slipped away and the knot in my throat formed. I would see his eyes grow colder and more distant than the look of the dead he normally bore, then watch as one of his broad shoulders twitched before I would wince. Do not open your eyes. Do not open your eyes for the love of God or Yahweh or whoever can hear your prayers, or you too will turn to a pillar of salt born of his brimstone. The sky rained fire and meteorites, cavernous craters opened in the earth, and the ground shook and then remained still. The tears of a child are not enough to save Sodom, but she supposed it couldn't hurt to try. I am not a Christian anymore. I never prayed a rosary, but I touched each of my bruised vertebrae with my fingertips and lingered on each one, a silent scream held firm behind my lips, wondering if this was a punishment for something I had done. I remember laying on the floor of the dining room, a sting on my face from where his fist had landed. I laid my cheek on the carpet there, felt the flush of blood and the rise of heat in the padding. I didn't have the energy to turn the other cheek. I just laid there wishing I had died. I slipped through the cracks of every institution, through the fingers of every trusted adult, and God treated me no different. He left the Jews to wonder, and he provided me the same treatment. I did not look for the Holy Land or Israel or Mecca, but to look in the mirror and see someone I recognized, woman or not. Maybe if I did not have my father's chin or shoulders, it would be easier. If I was still my mother's clone, maybe it would be easier to accept his glare still staring at me from inside the mirror. When I look up to meet it, I feel the fear settle in my stomach. The eyes are calm and corpse-like, and there's an anger there that scares me. I hold still, making sure I don't make any sudden movements, and I watch, waiting for the broad shoulder to twitch. I stare at him, and he stares at me, just as angry as I remember the day he was hauled away. But I know my father's eyes are not green. The image there is not quite him and almost not me. It does not have a name that feels like its own or a whole family now, as they have left me. But I suppose you could say that its shoulders bear the weight of the pain nicely. Thank you.
That was amazing. Our next reader is Noah Guthrie. Born in Scotland, raised in Nashville, Noah J. Guthrie specializes in fantasy, creative nonfiction, and various genres of eco writing. He has practiced his scribblings for 4 years among the longleaf pines of Berry College. And upon graduation, he plans to continue writing among the skyscrapers of Music City, joining his parents and 3 siblings under the benevolent rule of their tuxedo cat. Welcome, Noah.
Hello. So I'll be reading Alchemy of Pine, which is in the chaplet. Alchemy of Pine. Beyond the line of faux log cabins, longleaf pines had fallen like arrow shafts in the hillside. Some struck at perfect perpendiculars, while others lolled one way or the other against the sun, as though heaven's aim were slightly off. Whether they fell in verticals or slants, each pine seemed to have found its peace in the needle-matted soil, sighing in clouds of evergreen asterisks. Their deciduous neighbors breathed oval drops of lime. As a group, numerous and staggered, they drew a partial veil over the hillside, letting me see just far enough to sense the understory's depth, but not far enough to pierce it. I hiked up the slope, glancing at the drawn curtains of the nearest cabin as I passed. Its sides mimicked the stacked beams of a log cabin, but were so uniform and polished, they better resembled a dollhouse. It was a facade, designed for overnight campers, vacationers, and other drifters, people whose lives and machines had been shaped out of alignment with the pines, separate from them, even as they dwelt among them. While cicadas chittered in the foliage overhead, an air conditioning unit thumped to life with a hollow, cyclical moan. I entered the tree line. The peaked cabins receding behind me like a shingled mountain range. Underfoot, the dirt gave way to lanky clumps of grass, withered brown leaves, pine branches studded with cones, and saplings that shot with such energy they put me in mind of 4th of July sparklers, scintillating with emerald. It was a Georgian summer, so most of the forest was green and lush, but everywhere, little scars, wounds, and infections presented themselves. White-rimmed bites opened in the leaves, perforations stippled the trunks, gray shelf fungus, papery to the touch, licked up a fallen log, and the bare bone limbs of a dead pine surged up like a reversed lightning bolt. Near the forest's edge, a machine-sliced stump was still bleeding. Resin spread in a white smear to one side, beads of gold crystallized atop the grain, and a pale yellow crust spread where the nectar had dried. Most of the stump's rims were the width of a fingernail and tightly compressed, so when the dry resin covered them, they looked like a field of wheat. As I watched, a man crossed the field to test some of the beaded nectar. The resin smelled like lemon and sugar. Far from being limited to resin, the hunger of insects left its mark all over the forest, puncturing trunk, limb, and leaf, piercing my skin, orbiting my ears with its toothless whine. During the subsequent days, something of that hunger's persistence would reemerge in the red mouths across my torso, a constant nagging, a yearning for relief. The craving of the mosquito had inundated my flesh. A ways up the wooded slope, I discovered a trio of fallen trees. At least one of them was a pine, maybe more, but all of their boughs were leafless and black. They erupted from the ground in twining masses, arcing, coiling, billowing downhill like a deluge of octopus tentacles. Though dead, they bore a chaotic energy, as though each were giving birth to a new incarnation of Cthulhu. I approached the closest of the 3 fallen trunks, the pine. Its skin divided in earthy armor, and white fungus filled the cracks like caulking. At first, the bark surface seemed still, but as I focused on it, a line of ants appeared. They crawled in a dotted black squiggle, wielding their pincers-like scythes to reap the dead wood chips. Stepping onto the trunk, I experimented with heaving myself into the higher boughs. As I shook the lateral, hovering limbs, they made a sound like that of a horse-drawn carriage. The invisible hooves mingled with the cry of crickets and cicadas, then faded away. Hopping down again, I followed the fallen pine's length uphill, letting it guide me to a mane of upheaved roots. Whenever the pine had toppled, it had torn up some of the earth's guts with it, forming a cloud of airborne soil. The earth clung to the roots like flesh on a bared ribcage, and scatterings of stone lay embedded in it, shards of maroon, gray, white, and Mars orange. Larger stones lay clutched in the pine's tendrils like gems. One was the width of a jawbone, with a mineral smoothness and just a hint of gloss, terracotta lining its cheeks. Despite the agony of this upheaved soil, sprightly shrubs sprouted from it, their lance-like fronds bristling in wheels, and grass frothed at my eye level, a floating isle of green. The dirt had ascended into the empty air, vacuous yet fertile, like the void of creation myths. And somewhere in the mingling of root, fungus, damp, and grit, a miniature ecosystem had been born. Sorry, lost my place. This toppled trunk was one of three, and the first had fallen on the bare roots of the second, forming a bridge. Together, the bridge, roots, and soil traced a ring, a portal of sorts. So I dropped myself through, down to the cavity within which roots had torn free. Shadows caught at the corners of the hole, stuffed with black leaves and gnat-dotted webs, and the sun angled in, revealing a thin, rippling veil of terracotta dust where my shoes had scraped by. I crouched there for a moment. Air opened to my right, bark spread overhead, roots interwove before and behind, and dust came blowing from the left, drawing a ripple toward the light. I had entered another void, another navel where elements hovered at the edge of mixing, eager to work their alchemy. It often feels like finding the void is the easy part. A lost cat, a vanishing set of wheels, a broken arm, a monsoon that sweeps away people and lands, or yet another casket, full of emptiness. Such upheavals, however, often leave a mess of raw material, roots, webs, and leaves, a fertile clod of muck dangling in the air. If nature is bent on destroying itself, it's just as bent on recreating itself. It tosses all confined to the cauldron, and you're never quite sure what will emerge. While I was still exploring the hillside, a resonant, incorporeal tone emanated from the soil. It was a sound like steel married to air, and it burgeoned like rising mist from the ground, then receded. 5 times, out and in, serenity spreading in waves. It was 5 o'clock, I realized. Among the many machines we sculpted from the earth, the bell seems to retain something of its original soul. It carries the earth's heartbeat, its tones waxing and waning, but never ceasing, rippling out, stirring water, air, and dust.
Such a good writer. Nice work, man. You guys should read his honors thesis. Like I would. Fun. But I had to as well. It was great. I would do it again. So I taught a class that I wanted to call sausage making for creative writers. I was told that was a bad idea. So it got called some other name. But basically it's like how to submit and, do other things in the writing and publishing world. Part of that, I made students submit to literary publications, journals, magazines, as well as internships. And to sort of celebrate and elevate the inevitable rejection that would ensue, we had a rejection contest to see who would get the most rejections during the semester. And whoever won that would get to pick a party theme at the end of the semester, which is why my face is painted, because the theme was chosen by Ariel Fisher, who is here, if you want to raise your hand. Yeah, she got 38 rejections. Meredith Olsson did not win, I'm sorry to say. She did get a story accepted for publication. So even in losing, you won. In other lives, Meredith has made me a dark elf and soon a druid. He has let my daughter ride her like a horse all over the Blossom Hill restaurant, so much so that today, during a rejection party, which my daughter attended, when it came time to play hide and go seek, I was like, Charlotte, let's go hide. And Charlotte was like, no, I want to go hide with Meredith. And they did, in a box. and they won. Again, it's amazing. Meredith has put up with me a lot as my assistant. Thank you, for real. Always deciphering the hieroglyphs of my handwriting, grading my student quizzes, which part of me thinks many students should do, so you see what it's like on the other side. Making popcorn at the drop of a hat for the millionth movie screening that I've held, and just always being there and offering up, commiserating. And one time, I hope you remember this, you brought me a cheeseburger and a milkshake when I was having a bad day. I think that's pretty cool. Also, Meredith is a poet, sociologist, and F-bomb coming, a total fucking nerd from Roswell, Georgia. They spend their spare time seated in front of their TV, playing video games and mocking the characters in a terrible French accent. Example to come.
No.
They have a deep, passionate love for overcomplicated board games that no one else understands, and they hope that their poetry is just as incomprehensible. They pride themselves on their excellent and pretentious taste in most anything, including food, media, and grammatical choices, Oxford, comma, or death. They hope that one day their poetry and nonfiction can be as good as a fourth grader's. Please welcome Meredith.
Hello. I'm going to be honest, Mom, the camera is very distracting. So unfortunately, Dr. Peters, I did not bring any nonfiction to read today, only poetry.
Okay, it only hurts a little.
Yeah. When I came here for the first time in freshman year, I entered as a creative writing major. I did not expect to be a poet at all. I was going to be a fiction person, and I was going to write the next Harry Potter, and it was going to be amazing. And then I took a poetry class with Dr. Sandra Meek over there, and completely changed my mind. So today I thought I would take you through some of my poetry, starting with one of the first poems that I ever wrote here, and ending with the piece that was recently accepted for publication. So you can see how I've grown. Please remember, this was written 4 years ago. So, don't be too mean, all right? This is titled Excuses. I don't know what to write. For a writer, this could be a problem. I've stayed up and tried all night, but every word has been forgotten. I'm trying my best to let ideas out, coaxing them out of their cage, but all I can do is plead and shout when they refuse to come on stage. I've sat and sighed and studied, staring at a page, both of us blank. But my mind just seems so muddy has tanked. Well, perhaps I'm not being honest about what has been holding me back. I can't say that I've tried and take solace when it's motivation that I really lack. I have never pulled an all-nighter, and I don't have writer's block. I don't even look at my typewriter. Incentive is just out of stock. I want to be a writer, and that is why I'm scared. If I don't hold ambition much tighter, I'll end up with nothing to share.
Right? Yeah. Yep.
This next one is called When I Die in the City.
Okay.
When I die in the city, carry me to the ocean and lay me down in fields of sea-washed glass, aqua stones, while lacewing flies dissolve my organs and shade-grown moss creeps into my chest cavity. Cover me in ceremonial gold, gleaming by biting lantern light, and turn my cracked stone body into something more, little alchemy. Watch as the waves lick rapture blue at my fingers and savor every secret I wrapped in spun sugar and slipped into my mouth and under my tongue like coins. Wow. This final one is the piece that was recently accepted. Thank you. It is in the chat book, so if you want to follow, you are free to do so. This is titled In large reduce, I renamed it. It used to be Scylla and Charybdis, which might be what it's called in there. In large reduce. When I am young, I tell my mother that I am more boy than girl. The exact numbers were 60% boy, 10% girl, and 30% wolf. It is easier for me to find identity at the thought of racing through wild forest, tearing apart small animals with my teeth, than in pink shirts from Target that say I'm too pretty to do math. I bear tiny pointed fangs when my mother tries to untangle my hair. Categorization is inherent to the human experience. On the fan-made Wikipedia for gender expression, there are 695 pages of possible identities and their associated pronouns. I sift through the articles like grains of sand while knelt on an endlessly vast beach. A comment on one page describes feeling mostly cis male with a tiny bit of agender. Is that okay? I don't want to get anything wrong. There is a common misconception that there are more grains of sand on Earth than stars in the sky. In reality, while we often cannot see these stars, they easily outstrip the amount of sand on Earth. But there doesn't seem to be much practical difference between these two incomprehensibly large numbers. A man could spend his entire life counting sand or stars and never reach the end of either. And a friend once told me that in fact sand is simply dead stars stretched out into deepest infinity. As I grow up in a neighborhood filled with boys, it is hard for me to ignore the differences in our speeds when we all sprint across the street armed with airsoft guns. I am slower and smaller, and my younger brother eventually towers over me by almost 9 inches. I am often on the losing team. Throughout my childhood, the doctors I visit claim that I am supposed to be taller. Steroids taken over the course of a sickly year during my youth have stunted my growth. I look up at my family because I am the shortest out of 4 giants, and I wonder where I would fall on the scale had it not been for that year in the hospital. I imagine that the child-sized hospital bed pushed my bones together, splintering them until they fit the allowed space. In the locker room in high school, I am usually the tallest girl. To me, it seems as though I have been selected in an editing software and stretched up. I am both ahead, above, and lacking in the soft curves that freshman girls start to grow. Instead, my body is made of something sharper and more brittle, and I worry that bouncing against these girls would slice them open. My partner has been in my life since I was 15. We flirt casually for the first 3 years, and then more seriously until we start to call each other something permanent. When I tell him that I look in the mirror naked after a shower and cringe back from my reflection, he takes a day to think about it. Later, when we are lying in bed, I ask him if he still identifies as straight, as he has for the last 7 years. He looks at me and asks me if it really matters. He does not feel tied to any label. I am not a woman, I beg him. I know, he says. I know. Thank you.
Y'all are too good to be leaving us. What's that? Our next reader is Maya Sedwick. Maya has been a creative writing major with us for the last 4 years. She came in as a freshman with plans to one day become an editor and has since realized what it means to be an editor and that her life would look nothing like Jude Law's character. As this is being written, she has applications out to residential life programs at institutions as far-stretched as Hawaii, and she's hoping that as it's being read, one of them will have taken pity on her and given her a job because she's like totally good at what she does. These applications do not mean that she has dashed any hopes and dreams of pursuing writing professionally. She's just going a roundabout way to get there. Maya's time at Berry has been evenly divided between time spent in classes with Dr. Peters and working in residence life. She has fully accepted her fate as a creative nonfiction writer and is excited to see what rabbit holes future essays lead her down. Please welcome Mike.
God, I hate to go after Meredith. Not what I would have said. Lord have mercy. Okay, so I will be reading a piece of nonfiction that I wrote for one of my 9 classes that I had with Dr. Peters. I might have a major in creative writing, but I do have a minor in Clinton Crockett. So the piece that I'll be reading is hidden and it's in the chat book, so feel free to read along. And there is foul language. I'm sorry that I'm the first. But hidden. You tug on your top, which is really just a scarf you got your friend to tie around your middle, as you and your friends and your friend's boyfriend walk through the parking garage. Your friend's boyfriend looks down at himself and his jeans so tight you can nearly see the outline of his dick, and the tote bag your friend asked him to carry, and he says, "People are going to think I'm a fruit." She must give him a look or tug on his shoulder. He backpedals. "That's not a bad thing," he says. "It's not his fault, though, right? Because you never told him." Really, though, how was he supposed to know? You only ever talk to them about boys. You don't look like you like girls, at least not today. Today you've blended in well. The leather pants you thrifted match all the other girls there, and they've broken out their docks for the special occasion to match the ones you wear daily. Mom said, sometimes you can tell even as young as her kindergarten students. Sometimes it's just in the way they talk, she says, or even how they walk. You flash a quick smile to let her know that you can see it too and you find humor in it as well. And you never let her see your brain scrambling to find the clues you could have been leaving behind. All the ones that told her you were just like those kids that made her believe her God might just make people born that way. In June, you post one thing too many about the month dedicated to celebrating you. Your mom's best friend, that you forgot even followed you, gives your phone a buzz. "Do we play for the same team?" he asks. You're standing in the middle of a Sam's Club, choking back tears and trying to find those popsicles that are infused with vodka. Then he said something that made those tears flow. "I'll go to all the gay bars with you that you want. I'm your Uncle Anthony, and I love you no matter what." Through your tears, you managed to tell him that your mom didn't know, and neither did the rest of your family. Standing on your porch, back when you had barely come out to yourself, let alone anyone else, your cousin looked at you and told you your grandmother thought you were a lesbian. You had never had a boyfriend before and always seemed far more interested in your studies than the likings of a man. Inwardly, your heart beat so hard against your chest, you thought for sure your sternum was going to explode, smothering your cousin, mom, and sister in shards of bone and goo that used to make you who you were. Outwardly, you laugh. "Well, how did she say it?" you ask out of morbid but genuine curiosity. You didn't think your grandmother's God allowed for such a thing. "She actually seemed like she was okay with it," your cousin says with more shock than either of you care to point out, because you know it's warranted. Over the weekend, your friend explained to you that she couldn't understand the arrangement your other friends have. You know, the one where the girl would be able to go out on dates with another girl, and the boy that she's engaged to would be okay with it. Your head stoops low. You tell her that 8 months ago, before your heart was spilled out and left to stain the carpet, you would stay up nights looking at the body of your lover wrapped around you, his arms weighing heavy across your chest. At the time, you saw your life with him, graying heads, hollowed cheeks, the whole thing. But inside it gnawed at you. The chance to explore your sexuality meant, at the time, sacrificing the great love of your life. Something on her face mirrored relief and maybe a little disgust. A part of her was happy to hear her friend wasn't alone. But another part was deeply disturbed at the idea of having to make this decision. It still keeps you up some days. And now you've got your first girl crush. You catch glimpses of her in class, and your face goes pink when you make her laugh. It's new and fresh like the first fallen snow. You know it won't go anywhere, because for it to become something real, you have to tell the world what you are. And you and your God aren't ready for that. And then, really quickly, I'm going to read a poem that I actually submitted for workshop this semester, and I am not a poet, but I kind of liked this one. It's called Tuesdays Before Work, which is when I have therapy. My therapist told me I needed to write about my dad. I screwed up my face at her and pointed to the scraps of paper between us. There, my voice is strained like bits of cotton were shoved down my throat. There, she doesn't see him. My nails clawed until the paper between us should have lined an animal's crate. Can't you see him? My lover does. He sees him in the texts I send asking if he's mad at me after a one-word reply shouted at me, "You're not loved," when all it meant to say was, "Okay." My best friend sees my father when I lose my patience and leave a crimson stain on our white refrigerator door. My mom found him. I tried to hide the red in my eyes, but she saw him there, and he was lurking in the smell on my breath. So why can't you see him? I pleaded. He's right there. Look. Years old and worried about protecting her mom from the man in the blue truck. And again, love is not something you have to earn. Here too, my father did not show me what a good man was. Do you see him now? Or should I name him? My father, the alcoholic, the domestic abuser, the fear in my voice after one drink too many, the stroke victim, the blue in my eyes, the reason I used my left hand to scribble this now, the anxiety that rots my gut when I think about trying to make a life with someone outside of myself. There, my tongue tasted of iron. Is that enough? She did not budge, only asked, do you think that's enough? I crumbled in upon myself because I knew I'll never be empty of my father.
Oh, I don't want to follow my ass.
You have to put that back down.
Yeah,
Please.
Keep going.
No.
Just for everyone's information, pretty soon the Clinton Crockett Peters Minor will let you walk at graduation with a length of film strip from a cult movie no one has watched in 30 years.
That's perfect. All right.
So mine's pretty cool. I can't wait till I can take classes with you. I get to introduce Kayla. Like Meredith and Maya, Kayla has put up with so much for me. As a steadfast worker in the English department office, as our creative writing program assistant, and on a 28-hour car ride there and back to Philadelphia, she has borne the brunt of my dad jokes, my liberal style of dog parenting, and my penchant for commiserating about first world writer wines. I first met Kayla when she was a freshman, but I first saw her when I noticed that while working in the English department office, instead of texting or gaming or pining, Kayla spent her time writing and writing and writing. Even now, I find myself, me, with a PhD in creative writing and 2 books and blah, 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 constantly seduced by social media, distracted by those cult movies I mentioned earlier. But Kayla's amount of production makes me look up to her and wonder how she does it. I've read her poetry, her fiction, and her nonfiction. And I know she can do whatever she wants when she wants to. Me, I can't write a poem to save my daughter or dog or my life, but I hope to be reading Kayla's soon and forever. Kayla Slack began her time at Barry as a self-proclaimed novelist. Now she considers herself a poet and a novelist, and yes, a nonfiction writer, and ... Basically, she is always writing something. She's currently working on polishing her murder mystery / romance / coming of age / novel in verse titled Until the Dirt Settles, written as her honors thesis, which I got to read. It's awesome. In September of this year, she will begin her master's degree in poetry at, wait for it, the University of Edinburgh. Haggis.
That's
She
all he
loves
knows.
cats, paint by numbers, and curating Spotify playlists for her mini novels. Please welcome Kayla. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Can we put the mic back on?
Say when. Say when. Say when.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is what he means by I put up with a lot from him. So I'm reading a couple that are from the chapbook, but there's another one that I'm going to throw in there that I wanted to pull up so I have it ready. I see my mother's already filming.
So are we, Kayla.
It's for Daddy. I know. Oh, you're filming too. Okay. I'm gonna get one.
It's the fan club. Just let it happen.
Too much. Okay. All right. Anyway.
I'm not actually filming.
Moving on. So the first two that I'm going to read are from the novel in verse, Until the Dirt Settles. It is a murder mystery, YA, coming of age, anything you want to label it. Honestly, it's a lot. But it starts with the main character, Ivy, losing her father to a hit-and-run serial killer. So that is why the first two poems are going to sound the way that they sound. So the first one is Do the Dead Hear. The creaking of their coffins, the burrowing of creatures, the words left in their throats to dry, to rot. Carving. Away at the skin around my thumbnail, I imagine I'm ancient, a sculptor gone mad. There is something there, I know it. I am not making myself bleed for nothing. Maybe there is no greater meaning, or there is, maybe, I do believe God is in my thumb somewhere, deep beneath the bones, there is something. So the next one I'm going to read to make sure I have this right. Yes, it is called April. And I actually wrote this not in April, but it's about last April, so that's, yeah, I'm not saying anything else. Anyway, April. I want to carve out my marrow, flick with a knife like pits from peaches, get rid of the rot tunneled inside. Is it possible to hang my skeleton out to dry next to the rest of what he touched? Can the sun bleach this ache, obliterate, or does she carry too much within her already? Teach me, sun, teach me to flare, to expel all of which is no good for me, before my insides dissolve. So this next one that I'm going to read is not in the chapbook. Actually, the next two are not in the chapbook. Oops. So the first one is called Blue Highways, and I don't entirely know what this one's about. And my friends liked it, so we're going to read it. Blue Highways. If I taste my own blood, I can understand why my veins weave. My fingertips skip blue highways leading nowhere. I can't escape. My lips are rocky terrain, never kissed, only gnawed. I only know how to devour that which I cannot understand. My thumb is bleeding again. All I am is blood. Nails dug into skin make up for what is not. Shedding beneath, between legs, seems to forget how to furnish. I understand. Blue highways lead everywhere, except my womb. So this next one is written about someone that I lost recently, very near and dear to my heart. It's going to make my mother cry, I know now. I lost my aunt who basically helped raise me back in November. It was a really hard time. She actually passed away the day of my thesis defense. So it was a time. Dr. Meek and Dr. Peters are amazing for being so gracious with me that day. So this one's called Marlboro. The strawberry patch is overgrown. Yellow River Ranch ain't open anymore. Smoking a cigarette never sounded so good. I'd give myself a black lung if it meant I'd feel you again. B98.5 plays my kind of music. I got that from you, with a love for Christmas. These ornaments don't hang themselves right. Elvis doesn't sound as good as he used to. I won't smoke. You never knew, but I wanted to try it. In the hot winter summer, sunshine sizzling our skin, smoke pouring from our lips as we talked about old days. When I sat on your lap, too young to drive, my feet on the gas, golf cart flying across the front yard. You know, sometimes I wonder if you ever knew just how much I missed. Those days, those summers, Wednesdays, and how I wish I said I love you before I said goodbye. So the last one I'm going to read is, I'm taking a page out of Meredith's book here. The last one I'm reading is in the chapbook. This, believe it or not, you guys, is from, I think it was intermediate poetry with Dr. Meek, so I think it was second semester that I was ever here at all.
Wow.
Yeah. Why'd you say wow like that? That makes me feel awkward. Anyway.
Can I say ooh?
Anyway, this is a found poem, and basically a found poem is you take language from anywhere in the world and you piece it together as your own. And so this one is comprised of entries from the Oxford English Dictionary on the word lie. The longest lie. When the east wind began to lie in ruins heavily upon, we at least will be a people of truth lovers and lie haters. You must lie on the bed which you have made for yourself. In thy lie-consuming mirror, sometimes the joke or the lie told makes up the better part of the occasion. He holds many profound truths, but is quite unable to see how they lie to each other. But let us view these truths with closer eyes and trace them through the prospect as it lies. There lies your way, but my humor lies another way. The bees settle outside the hive to lie out, to lie up in lavender. Why don't we sit down and lie to one another? Thank you.
Reached our final reader tonight. And after Rachel reads, I think Dr. Peters will come up and say a few things about him here. But I did just want to say, make sure you have your chapbook and you get everybody to sign it for you before you leave. So, 10 years from now, you can sell it on eBay. Don't miss out on that. So our final reader is Rachel Waldrop. Rachel is a creative writing major with a minor in psychology. She is from Butts County, Georgia. Yes, she says, you can laugh at the name. Where she became a writer in a lineage of engineers, accountants, farmers, and moonshiners. At Berry, she's a member of Sigma Tau Delta, Lambda Sigma, and the Berry College Drumline. And I can't believe I never knew that.
Neither did I.
Are there videos on YouTube?
Maybe.
I'll look for that. Though she mainly writes fiction, she has a forthcoming literary essay in the University of North Georgia's Papers and Publications undergraduate magazine. In the future, she hopes to work as an editor for a publishing house. Please welcome Rachel.
Sorry, I'm the shortest one here. So, before I start reading, I just have one piece, and it's a fiction piece. Before I start reading, I just want to say there are a few foul words in here. And this is meant to be a fun piece, so you can just relax, don't take it too seriously. And it's also been kind of reduced in size, so I apologize for the cliffhanger. Alright, it's called The X Factor. It amazed me how Ralph could formulate a plan in the span of a few hours, and one as dangerous and risky as breaking into his ex-girlfriend's house and dousing her underwear, as well as her lover's underwear, in poison ivy. We all stood outside, lounging against the red truck and listening to him explain what each of our roles were. Everyone had a part to play, including me, despite being new to his delinquent crew. Jason and Toby would create a distraction in the backyard to lure Sadie and her lover out of her bedroom and buy us time to infiltrate. Gideon and Ariel would keep watch for any patrolling police cars or curious neighbors, and Gideon would be the designated getaway driver. That left me and Ralph to commit the actual crime. According to Ralph, our job was to sneak into Sadie's house by climbing into her bedroom window and rub the poison ivy tendrils into their underwear before they got back from investigating the planned commotion. This sounded like a solid plan, except Sadie's bedroom was on the second floor. Toby also pointed out extra cars in the garage. That meant the Fitzgerald parents were home. That's absolute shit, Jace grumbled. He turned to Ralph, irritated. I thought you said her parents worked night shifts. Ralph, however, didn't seem fazed. He stared into the garage, as if analyzing something the rest of us couldn't see, and whispered into Toby's ear. Toby smiled and beckoned Jace closer. How much money you got in your wallet? He asked. Jace scowled and pulled out a camouflage print wallet. Like $7. I bet $7 I can create a better distraction than you. Jace paused to put his wallet away. He scowled a moment longer and then said, You're on, Toby. With that, the two of them headed back to the front yard. Ralph tapped my shoulder and called for me to follow him to the backyard. I struggled to keep up with his long-legged strides and quietly huffed in exertion. If her parents are home, he whispered to me, then she's not going to be in her bedroom. She's going to be in the basement suite. He halted in his long strides and jerked his head to a faded white door. Pulling a bobby pin out of his hoodie pocket, he knelt and stuck it in the doorknob. How do you know all of this? I muttered as I knelt with him. Ralph dug around in the knob for a second before answering. I learned how to be prepared, he said. And Sadie's my ex, remember? I know how to get in and out of her house undetected. As soon as he finished answering, the door clicked and he pushed it open to reveal a wooden staircase leading downward. He rose to his full height and looked at me with playfulness in his eyes. In the moonlight, I noticed they were a brilliant blue, an attractive match with jet black hair. I would say ladies first, he whispered, but I think that's inappropriate right now. You're too pretty, you know? My heart leaped in my chest as he stalked down the stairs. Ralph Jennings, the troublemaker I've loved since freshman year, called me pretty. No dream could compare to the reality that Ralph actually thought I was pretty. But a nagging voice cut through my thoughts like a hot knife. He's teasing you. He doesn't really like you. He's using you to do his bidding. Hey, are you coming? A blush rose to my cheeks as Ralph's low voice snapped me out of my zoning out. I carefully followed him down the wooden staircase. Our footsteps were muffled by the blaring of music around the corner. However, that didn't stop us from watching our feet with every step we descended. After what felt like a lifetime, we came to the bottom of the staircase, where we stayed concealed behind a slab of concrete. I tried to peer around, but Ralph yanked my arm back and nearly slammed me against his chest. In the blur of being pulled, I saw a fold-out bed against the back wall and a flat-screen television mounted opposite of it. Faint rock music played from someone's pitiful phone speaker, and I felt Ralph gasp when the song reached its chorus. That bitch, he said, she's playing our song. We're about to do something totally stupid that will most likely get us arrested, I hissed at him. And you're more concerned that she's playing your song. I expected a retort from him, but he hushed as footsteps echoed overhead. Sadie and her lover heard it too, because the fold-out bed stopped squeaking and someone whispered frantically. Whatever they said was lost to the sound of a deep voice booming from upstairs. Ralph let out an easy breath against the top of my head, laughter bubbling inside of him. Sadie Lane Fitzgerald, the deep voice yelled. I jumped against Ralph. Get up here now! The music abruptly stopped, and the atmosphere in the basement went frigid. I held my breath as Sadie raced by us into another room that branched off from the main one, completely naked. Ralph grabbed my wrist and led me to a corner in between the staircase and the room Sadie ran into. My heart pounded in my chest, and I swore everyone downstairs heard it. Even Ralph's heart thumped crazily into my back through his hoodie, though I had a feeling it was from excitement rather than sheer terror. Within seconds, Sadie returned from the room wrapped in a towel, her white blonde hair damp and plastered to her back with tangles. She mouthed something to her lover across the basement and quickly ascended another staircase opposite of the one Ralph and I came from. Everything in the basement went still. I froze against Ralph, too scared to enact the next part of the plan. Ralph, on the other hand, let go of me and stepped forward. He toed his red Converse shoe against the floorboards until one made a loud creak. Shuffling came from the other side of the wooden staircase, and I watched the naked body of a boy disappear into a closet. Calling this a basement suite is an understatement, I thought. Ralph clamped a hand to his mouth and faced me. He squinted with joy. My eyes widened at him. Who was that? I asked. It took him a second to regain his composure, and I worried the naked boy in the closet heard us. When Ralph stopped wheezing to himself, he whispered through a grin, "That, Nikki, is Zachary Quinn." My brain clicked at the name. Zachary Quinn was one of the football players of Heritage County High. He wasn't exactly a star, not like our quarterback, but his senior status automatically made him well known in the athlete community. "I know, right?" Ralph whispered delayedly. "Can't believe you just saw a football player naked, can you?" I inched closer to him, cowering behind as he pulled the Ziploc bag of poison ivy from his hoodie pocket. That thing was like a magician's hat. "Only you would find it exciting to walk in on naked people," I retorted. He chuckled with genuine mirth. A smile played at my lips. "So he finds me pretty and funny." Ralph crept towards the far side of the fold-out bed and knelt next to a pair of pink lace panties. My face flushed at the sight, but he didn't seem bothered. Then again, he admitted to having sex with Sadie before, so he probably knew what her underwear looked like. He pulled out a pair of gloves from his back pocket, slid them on, and reached into the Ziploc bag. Without hesitation, he tore out a tendril and rubbed it into the lace panties. "Oh my God," I whispered. My skin itched as he worked, but I dared not scratch myself. Ralph stopped long enough to hand me another pair of gloves in the Ziploc bag. "Here, go get Zachary's." I was taken aback. "I am not touching Zachary Quinn's boxers," I hissed. "Well, one of us has to," he hissed back, "and I don't want to because it's disgusting to touch another man's underwear." I rolled my eyes and yanked the gloves out of his hand. After struggling to slide them on, I snatched the Ziploc bag and tiptoed to the other side of the fold-out bed. It wasn't hard to find the boxers. They were the only bright red object in a sea of dark clothes. Delicately, I pinched a poison ivy tendril and cringed as my fingertips itched through the glove. I pulled it out and braced it against the boxer's material, right where Zachary's genitals would touch it. Ralph glanced over at me, his eyebrows lowering. "Come on, girl," he mumbled, "rub that shit in there." I scoffed and pressed the tendril against the boxers. If Zachary or Sadie ever found out we did this, they would surely let everyone know. What if they tried to get back at us? What if I ended up being outcasted because I was dumb enough to go along with Ralph's little prank? What if two hands grabbed my shoulders from behind and I dropped the boxers? Ralph grasped me with raw fear on his face. His blue eyes no longer glinted with excitement. "We gotta go," he said in a low tone. He then pointed upstairs and I heard it. Voices. Jason Toby talked to the dance party, accompanied by heavy footsteps. And they were right outside the door of the house's ground floor. I abandoned the prank and snagged the Ziploc bag from the fold-out bed. Ralph closed his fingers around the sleeve of my peasant blouse and tugged. But we didn't move fast enough. The closet door slid open to reveal Zachary holding a hand over his genitals. "You," he growled. He stepped over the threshold into the main room. His brown hair fell over his eyes like bangs, his gaze locked dead on the delinquent ringleader. Ralph stopped as he made it to the bottom step. When he met Zachary's gaze, he gave the raging football player a toothy grin and bolted up the stairs 2 at a time. He tugged harder at my arm, half dragging me up the staircase. I averted my eyes from Zachary as he uncovered his genitals to reach out and grab his boxers. However, I wasn't swift enough. The sight of him naked bore itself in my eyelids. Zachary raced towards us, only to trip on the bottom step, bumping his chin right below my foot. I let out a yelp of terror before Ralph hauled me into the night. He reached to slam the white door but froze. I peeked from around his broad frame to see a short, stocky man in a white tank top and a pair of blue and white striped boxers at the bottom of the staircase, wielding a rifle. "Run!" Ralph screamed through the night sky. I took off as fast as I could in my black flats. His heavy breathing sounded beside me, as well as another's. I whipped my head around to see a naked Zachary following behind. The stocky man with a rifle trailed him.
I'm happy to give up my time if we can hear the rest of that. I want to know where that goes. Also, what was there were so many good one-liners. I wonder, I'm just thinking, just a thought out loud, if "Come on, girl, rub that shit in there" should be on the creative writing t-shirt.
Yes.
We'll of course attribute our source. That was so much fun. So now comes the point where I have to tell you guys the perennial question that I have as a professor, And that's that, do I let these, wonderful, inspiring, kind, often hilarious students graduate and move on, or do me and Meek fail them all so they can't go anywhere? It's an opportunity, it's a tough call. But I would feel bad because you guys are off to do great things, and that does make it better. It does. You're leaving us, but you're going to go off and do great things, right? I am a dad, and so I think this does sort of make me a little bit more wistful, maybe. I don't know. Maybe this is good practice for me for when Charlotte finally realizes what a guy she has in a dad, and she goes off and does something. I don't know. But I will say I wanted to announce something, and I've talked to some of you all about this, but we think we're going to start an alumni reading series where we invite alumni back, both because selfishly we miss y'all, but also because I think it's such a cool opportunity for students, current students, to see where alumni have gone, what they're doing, how they're faring, what they're writing, and honestly what advice they would have for current students. So I don't know when we can invite you guys. It may not be in a year or 2 or 3, I don't know. Hopefully it'll be in like groups of 2 or 3. But you also know that you can come whenever, right? Like our doors are open. Hell, I have an IKEA couch that is really comfortable. Just let me know. It is very comfortable. Love that couch. So there's that. And, I am a dad, so I want to give some unbidden dad advice. As all dads do. No one asks for advice, we give it anyway. And here's what I want to, yes, please, write this down, multiple places, record this. And it's not really advice, it's so much as like a request, and that's that y'all stay in touch with me and Dr. Me. Don't just like go off quietly into the good night of the universe. Like, let us know what's going on with y'all, because I want to say dummies, but that seems pedagogically like inadequate to call your students dummies. But we are invested in your lives, like we are. So do stay in touch and just let us know where you're going. And obviously, I hope you guys know this, stay in touch with yourselves. So Jamie Poisson, you guys know Jamie Poisson, David James Poisson, right? He's the reason we have the Poisson series. Well, actually, Dr. Meek is really the reason we have the Poisson series. So yeah, there's no for sure. It's named after Jamie, and Jamie's awesome. Jamie is a former student. He's written a couple of amazing books, a collection of short stories called The Heaven of Animals, and then his novel is called Lake Life. Is that right? Yeah, I've only read his short stories, and they're dynamite. The first one's about a giant alligator, among other things. And anyway, he came a couple of weeks ago, and what he said about our program really made me feel pretty good, which is he felt that our program was more like an MFA than a bachelor's, right? In terms of the close contact with the professors, how students have lunches and dinners with the visiting writers. That doesn't happen in a lot of places. How we take some students to AWP, how we do like this publications classes. Yeah, we're like, Meredith got published, and we celebrate rejections. Like all of this sort of seemed like a very MFA-esque program, which made me feel great. Here's one thing I do want to sort of give you a warning about. There is a phenomenon called the post-MFA slump. You guys heard of this? So this is the idea that when you finish your MFA, your writing kind of goes, woo. And not to like make you freak out about it, there are ways to deal with the post-MFA slump. And I think the big way to deal with it is to keep yourselves accountable. Do a thing that I've done, which is called friends shops instead of workshop. You're just workshopping with friends, either over Zoom, or maybe you guys meet up at like a coffee shop or a Dunkin' or something, and you guys workshop each other's pieces. Keep yourselves accountable, set yourselves deadlines, and meet the deadlines. A big one, a big huge one, I'm gonna give you guys a little anecdote, because that's what dads do, is find a community that values what you value, that values literature, writing, and books. So for a little bit, I sold canoes and kayaks in Boise, Idaho. I don't know why that's funny. I did it. Worked really hard. Terrible I would bring books to read on my lunch break, and I would clock out for my lunch break, and my boss was like freaked out that I would bring books on my lunch break. Like he just looked at me and was like, what are you doing? Like he seemed on edge. It was almost like I had a weapon in my hand. He actually asked me to stop doing that. Again, I was clocked out in the break room on my lunch break, reading books. Not like the Communist Manifesto, right? Not like the Anarchist Cookbook. I was reading like Lonesome Dove. You know? And he's like, just don't do that. I'm like, okay. And I just found that very weird. And like, it was just a place, you know, every place is different, right? This is not like a dunk on them, but they were like big NASCAR fans. So they would like have NASCAR playing. Again, nothing against NASCAR, but it wasn't my place. They didn't value the things I valued. Fast forward a couple of months, I got a job as an outdoor guide. And here's where I was like, oh, these are my people, because they had like a mini lending library in the front. All of the leaders would always carry books. They would always talk about books, and they clearly valued the things that I valued. And that was really cool. And that was not like an MFA program or a college program. That was a job, you know. But I found my community, and I was able to like keep going. So I do recommend that. I also highly recommend traveling to weird places, exposing yourself to weird situations. I did not say dangerous. I said weird. Have unnecessary jobs and always take notes. One of my favorite anecdotes about the writer Joan Didion is that every time she went to a house party, she made sure to go to the bathroom and open up the medicine cabinets and look at what people were taking. And I find that hilarious. I don't do that. For those of you who have invited me over to your house. Maya, do you have a question?
Yeah, do you happen to take journals to your house parties that you go to this week?
There are some parties I've been to where I've taken a journal and just recorded people talking, yes. That was another Joan Didion thing. She would just be out in public and just write down people's conversations, because sometimes they're like really, really interesting and wild, wild. And they just provide you voices and texture. I think it's just good to take notes. And really, I think what Joan Didion is doing, even if it's maybe a little creepy, is she's trying to learn people, right? And here's a quote from Roger Ebert. If you can't understand other people, then you'll always be trapped in a box within yourself. And that really has stuck with me, because I just want to understand people. I'm not trying to uncover their secrets, but I do want to know what makes them tick. And I think that makes me a better writer. So if you can do anything like that,
Are you okay?
by all means. But really, here's what I want to say. Stay in contact with each other. Like, hype each other up. Review each other's books, right? Like, post about everything. Go see them when they're doing a reading. Commiserate and heal together. Yeah. Hold on. Yeah, there's a whole other page. All right, y'all. This is the end, I swear.
Oh my god.
In the heat death of the universe, from one point of view, nothing matters. Everything will be dead quiet, all will be forgotten. But what we have now, sleeping or not, is each other. And what we have, of course, is now. It is never a mistake to try to make meaning out of the universe, and I do not believe it is a mistake to try and connect. We will miss you terribly, but I don't regret what we did, and I do not regret our now, even if now we have to say goodbye. So I want to say thank you for being here, and that we love you. And yeah, that's it. Thanks. I do think we have to ask for, are we going to do pictures again? Was that the plan?